The assembly hall stretched wider than any building had ever seen on Earth. Floating platforms held delegates from 40 different species, each one stranger than the last. Some looked like insects. Others glowed with inner light. A few were just clouds of gas held together by force fields. Stood on the human platform with beside him. She kept her face calm, but he could see her fingers tapping nervously against her tablet. 3 months. That was how long humanity had been part of the Galactic Coalition. 3 months of learning that Earth was just one small planet in a galaxy full of life. 3 months of trying to prove that humans belonged here. Today was the welcoming of Scar's ceremony. Every new species had to share their greatest war, their biggest conflict. It was meant to show that they understood sacrifice and struggle, had prepared for this. He had spent weeks going through human history, trying to decide which war to present. "The delegate will now speak," announced the High Counselor. Her name was Myra, and she was one of the. Her species looked like beings made of pure golden light. She was thousands of years old, or so had told him. A platform floated forward. On it stood Ambassador of the. He looked like a giant praying mantis, but with 4 arms instead of 2. His shell was deep green and covered in what looked like battle scars. When he spoke, his voice clicked and buzzed, but the translator in his ear turned it into words. "My people fought the Great Hive War," announced, his voice full of pride. "For 300 years the northern hives battled the southern hives. Millions died. Our world nearly broke apart, but we survived. We became stronger. We learned that unity was the only path forward." The assembled delegates made various sounds of approval. Some clicked, others hummed. A few flashed different colors. 300 years, continued, turning to look at the human platform. "The longest war in known galactic history. Can any species here claim a conflict of such scale?" His large eyes fixed on. "What about the newcomers, the humans? Have you ever even experienced true warfare?" Felt stiffened beside him. He placed a gentle hand on her arm and stepped forward. The platform carried him toward the center of the hall. All eyes and sensors and energy fields focused on him. "Ambassador asks a fair question," said calmly. His voice was quiet, but the hall's systems carried it to every delegate. "Before I answer, I need to ask you something." He paused and looked directly at the ambassador. "Which war do you mean?" Silence fell over the hall. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like something physical pressing down on everything. Santeni twitched in confusion. "Which war? I asked if your species has experienced warfare. One war, your greatest conflict." "Yes," said. "I understood your question, but I need you to be more specific. Which war would you like to hear about?" More silence. Then a delegate from the species spoke up. They were large reptilian beings, proud warriors. "Is the translator malfunctioning? The human is using plurals. He said wars, not war." His platform floated forward to join. She held up her tablet. "The translation is working perfectly. Ambassador said wars because that is the correct word. We have had many wars." "How many?" asked High Counselor Myra. Her golden light seemed to pulse with interest. And exchanged a look. "That depends on how you count," said. "Major wars, regional wars, civil wars, wars between nations or wars between groups within nations." "Major wars," said quickly. "Surely you have only had 1 or 2 major wars, conflicts large enough to threaten your entire species." Tapped her tablet. A holographic display appeared in the center of the hall. It showed Earth, slowly rotating. Then a timeline appeared beside it, stretching back thousands of years. "We will start with recorded history," said, "though humans fought each other long before we learned to write it down." Red marks began appearing on the timeline. Each mark represented a war. The marks came slowly at first, then faster. Ancient Sumer, ancient Egypt, the Greek city-states, the Roman Empire, the Mongol invasions. Each conflict was labeled with a name and a number. "These numbers represent deaths," explained, "people killed in the fighting." The Mongol invasion showed 40 million deaths. Several delegates made sounds of shock. That was just one series of wars, continued. We have more. The timeline moved forward. The 30 Years' War, 8 million dead. The wars, 7 million dead. The delegates were no longer making sounds of approval. They were silent, watching the numbers grow. Then came the 20th century. World War I said quietly, 20 million deaths in 4 years. Ambassador stood up on his platform. That is impossible. No species could survive such a war. You are saying this was just one war, one single conflict. Yes, said, and we had another one right after it. The display changed. World War II, 85 million deaths in 6 years. The hall erupted in noise. Delegates were shouting, clicking, humming, flashing. High Counselor Myra raised her hand and the noise stopped. Explain, she said simply. Took a deep breath. These were our 2 largest wars, but they were not our only wars. The Korean War killed 3 million. The Vietnam War killed 2 million. The wars in the Middle East, in Africa, in South America, some lasted years, some lasted decades, some are still being resolved in their aftermath. How? The question came from an elderly delegate of the quill species. They looked like floating jellyfish covered in thin spines. How did your species survive? Barely, said. Many times we came close to destroying ourselves completely. We created weapons that could end all life on our planet. We pointed them at each other. We came within minutes of using them. But you did not, Myra said. No, agreed. We did not, because even in our darkest moments, enough humans chose peace. Enough humans decided that survival was better than victory. He looked around the hall at all the assembled species. You asked about our battle scars. The truth is, we have so many that we had to ask which ones you wanted to see. Every human carries the weight of our violent history. We learn about these wars in school. We build monuments to remember them. We teach our children about the cost of hatred and fear. Slowly sat back down on his platform. The Great Hive War nearly destroyed my people. It was the worst thing that ever happened to our species. And you are saying you have had dozens of conflicts that were worse. Yes, said simply. Then how, asked, his voice barely above a whisper, are you still alive? How is your species still unified enough to reach the stars? Smiled, but it was a sad smile. That, Ambassador, is a much longer story, and if you are willing to listen, we are willing to share it. High Counselor Myra's light pulsed brightly. I think we would all very much like to hear this story. The assembly will reconvene tomorrow. Humans, please prepare to help us understand your species, because right now you are the greatest mystery in the galaxy. The next morning stood in front of the assembly again. This time he was not alone. Behind him stood a military advisor who had served in 3 different peacekeeping missions on Earth. To his left was a specialist who studied how different species thought and felt. Stood to his right, ready with her tablet full of information. The delegates were already in their places, but the mood was different from yesterday. There was no pride in the air, no sense of competition. Instead, there was something else. Fear, maybe, or curiosity mixed with horror. You want to understand humanity, began. To do that, you need to understand that we are a species of contradictions. We are capable of terrible violence, but we are also capable of incredible compassion. Sometimes both exist in the same person in the same moment. He gestured to who activated the holographic display. An image of Earth appeared, but this time it was divided into sections. Each section showed a different time period, a different war. Let me tell you about the wars, said. A single man named Napoleon led his nation to conquer much of a continent. Millions died, cities burned, families were destroyed. The hologram showed armies clashing, cities under siege. But here is what you need to know. After Napoleon was finally defeated, the nations that fought against him did not destroy his country. They did not enslave his people. Instead, they helped rebuild. They created systems to try to prevent such wars from happening again. It did not work, said Ambassador quietly. No, agreed. It did not. 100 years later we had World War I, new weapons, worse destruction, poison gas that melted soldiers' lungs, machine guns that could kill hundreds in minutes, artillery that turned entire forests into wastelands. The hologram shifted to show trenches, mud, barbed wire. 10 million soldiers died, another 10 million civilians. An entire generation of young men was nearly wiped out in some countries. A delegate from the quill species made a sound like wind through branches. And still you continued. Stepped forward. May I explain something about human psychology? When we experience trauma, our brains try to protect us. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes we convince ourselves it was not as bad as it really was. Sometimes we tell ourselves that next time will be different. 20 years after World War I ended, World War II began, continued. This time, the weapons were even worse. We had invented planes that could drop bombs on cities. We created weapons of such power that a single bomb could destroy an entire city in seconds. The hologram changed to show Hiroshima, the mushroom cloud rising into the sky, the flattened buildings, the shadows burned into walls where people had been standing. The assembly hall went completely silent. 2 cities said. In seconds, 200,000 people were gone. Most of them were not soldiers. They were families, children, old people, workers, artists, teachers. We did that to each other. Why are you still alive? The question came from High Counselor Myra. With such weapons, why did you not destroy yourselves? Looked at, who nodded. The military advisor stepped forward and began to unbutton his uniform jacket. Under it, he wore a simple shirt. He lifted the shirt to reveal his torso. Scars, dozens of them. Some were thin lines, others were thick and twisted. One looked like a star-shaped burn that covered his entire left side. My great-grandfather fought in the Korean War, said. His voice was rough, like he did not speak often. He took shrapnel from an artillery shell. He survived. My grandfather went to Vietnam. A bullet went through his chest, missed his heart by inches. He survived. My father was in the Gulf War. An explosion threw him 30 feet and broke half the bones in his body. He survived. He paused and touched one of the scars on his ribs. I was in Afghanistan. A bomb went off next to our vehicle. I was the only one who survived. 4 generations, whispered a delegate. 4 wars. One family said, and we are not special. Many human families have similar stories. We carry these scars, all of us. Some on our bodies, some in our minds, some in our hearts. Spoke again. Here is what makes humans different, I think. We remember. Other species might forget, might move on, but we tell stories about our wars. We make films and write books. We build museums. We teach our children every detail of every horror we have committed, not to make them proud, to make them careful. A young delegate from a species called the spoke up. They looked like otters standing upright with large eyes and soft fur. But if you remember so much pain, how do you live? How do you not hate each other? Smiled, and this time it was not a sad smile, because we also remember the other parts. After World War II, the nations that won did not enslave the nations that lost. Instead, they helped rebuild. America and Japan fought a terrible war. Now they are allies. Germany tried to conquer Europe twice. Now Germany leads efforts for peace. France and England fought each other for hundreds of years. Now their cities are connected by tunnels under the ocean. We are capable of change, added. That is our real strength. We can look at our history and say never again. Sometimes we mean it. Sometimes we fail, but we keep trying. Minyu entered the hall. He was a security officer, normally quiet and watchful. But now he walked to the center and stood beside. Without a word, he rolled up his sleeve. His entire arm was covered in burned scars, the skin twisted and discolored. Syria, he said simply. I was a medic. These are not from fighting. These are from pulling people out of burning buildings. Children, families. It did not matter which side they were on. They were hurt, so I helped them." He looked around at the assembled aliens. "You want to know humanity's secret? This is it. The same hands that make weapons also heal wounds. The same minds that plan battles also write peace treaties. The same hearts that can hate can also love. We are not good or evil. We are both all the time, and we choose every day which one to be." An elderly quill delegate floated forward. His name was, and he was a historian. "I have studied thousands of species across the galaxy. I have never seen anything like this. You carry all your wars with you, all your dead, all your mistakes. How do you bear such weight?" "Together," said simply. "No single human carries it alone. We share it. We talk about it. We help each other remember and help each other heal. My grandfather told me stories about his war. I tell those stories to my children. The pain gets passed down, but so does the wisdom." And the hope added. "Every human child learns about war, but they also learn that peace is possible, that forgiveness is possible, that we can be better than we were." High Counselor Myra's golden light pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. "The Galactic Coalition has existed for 10,000 years. In that time we have had perhaps 24 wars total. You had that many in a single century, and yet you reached the stars, you found us, you came in peace." She paused. "Humanity, you are more dangerous than any species we have ever encountered, but also perhaps more valuable. You know the cost of war better than anyone. That knowledge is worth more than any weapon." The ambassador stood up slowly. "I mocked you yesterday. I apologize. The Great Hive War taught my people the value of unity, but it was one lesson learned once. You have learned that lesson hundreds of times, and you keep learning it." "We have to," said quietly, "because forgetting would be worse than any war." 3 weeks passed after the assembly. Thought the difficult conversations were over. He was wrong. The message came in the middle of the night, waking him from restless sleep. It was High Counselor Myra, and her golden light looked dimmer than usual. "We need human help. Now." An hour later, sat in an emergency council meeting with and several other human representatives. The holographic display showed 2 fleets of ships facing each other in a region called the Outer Reach. One fleet belonged to the other belonged to the. "They are fighting over a mining colony," explained a council member. "Both sides claim the rights to it. Words have become threats. Threats have become weapons fire. 3 ships have been destroyed. Hundreds are dead." "Why tell us?" asked. "We are the members of the coalition. We have no authority here." Myra's light pulsed. "That is exactly why we need you. The do not trust us to be fair. We have old relationships, old obligations, but humans. You have no history with either side. More importantly, after what you showed us in the assembly, both sides are curious about you. They will listen." "You want us to stop a war," said slowly. "We want you to try, because if anyone understands what will happen if they do not stop, it is you." 6 hours later stood on the bridge of a human ship called the. Captain Sara was in command, a woman with sharp eyes and quick decisions. She had been a fighter pilot before becoming a ship captain. Stood beside along with a young pilot and who handled all communications. "Both fleets are armed and ready," Sara reported. "They have 40 ships, they have 35. If they start shooting seriously, thousands will die in the first hour." "Can we get between them?" asked. Sora laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Sure. We can also paint a target on our hull. This ship has shields but not much in weapons. We are a peacekeeping vessel, not a warship." "Good," said. "That is exactly what we need." They moved slowly into the space between the 2 fleets. Immediately, both sides started sending messages. Most of them were angry. Some were threatening. "Open a channel to both fleets," ordered. "Video, I want them to see my face." Worked her controls. "Channel open. You are speaking to both command ships." Stood in front of the camera. Behind him the bridge of the was visible. Simple. Clean. No weapons displays, only navigation screens and communication stations. "This is Ambassador of Earth. I am here at the request of the Galactic Coalition. I am not here to take sides. I am here to show you something." "We do not need humans interfering," came a voice from the flagship. "Recognized ambassador, this is between thee and the—" "You are right," said calmly. "This is your conflict. But before you continue, I want to show you what that conflict will look like. You have both heard about human wars. Now see them." The display behind changed. It showed footage from human history. Real footage, not recreations. The trenches of World War I, filled with mud and bodies. The ruins of cities after World War II. The aftermath of battles where nothing was left but smoke and blood. "This is Verdun," said as the images changed. "One battle, 10 months, 300,000 dead. The ground was so full of bodies that crops would not grow there for 50 years. More images. This is Dresden, one night. 25,000 people burned alive. Most of them were running away from the war, not fighting in it. The bridge was silent. Even the crew of the looked uncomfortable. These were their own history, their own shame. This is what war looks like when you refuse to stop," continued. "When you decide that pride matters more than lives. When you convince yourself that one more battle will solve everything." Stepped forward. He was young, barely 30, but his eyes looked much older. "My name is, I was a fighter pilot for the human military. 5 years ago, my squadron was running training exercises. Simple stuff. We had done it 100 times, but that day someone made a mistake, just one small mistake, a communication error." He paused, his jaw tight. "My squadron leader thought we were supposed to break left. I thought we were supposed to break right. We had 6 planes in the air. 3 seconds later, we had 2. 4 of my friends died because of a mistake. Not because of enemies, not because of battle, because someone was not careful enough." He looked directly at the camera. "You are about to start a real war over a mining colony. How many of your people will die from mistakes? How many ships will collide in the chaos? How many weapons will hit the wrong target? In war, everyone makes mistakes. And in war, mistakes kill people." Activated another display. "Let me show you something else. These are peace treaties, human peace treaties." Images of documents appeared. After World War I, the winners punished Germany so harshly that 20 years later, Germany started another war. We learned from that mistake. After World War II, the winners helped rebuild. They created trade agreements. They formed alliances. "The end will still be neighbors after this fight," added. "That colony is on the border of your territories. You will see each other every day. Do you want to see each other as enemies forever? Or do you want to find a solution that lets you both survive?" A new voice came through the speakers. It was the commander, a deep rumbling sound. "The colony is ours by right. We discovered it first." "But we filed the claim first," countered. "Under coalition law, the filing matters." "Then let the coalition courts decide," said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She blushed but continued. "Sorry, but is that not why you have courts? To decide disputes without fighting?" "The courts take years," the commander growled. "And war takes lives," said. "What is more valuable, time or people?" There was a long silence. Finally spoke. "During your wars, did humans ever stop before the fighting got bad? Did you ever choose peace before the killing started?" Thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes, not often enough. Usually we fought until we were too tired or too broken to keep going. That is our shame, but it is also our lesson. The later you stop, the more you lose. Stop now and you lose only time and pride. Keep fighting and you lose people who can never come back." Captain Sora stood up and moved beside. "I lost my entire wing during a peacekeeping mission. We were not even in a war, just trying to keep people safe. A misunderstanding, bad intelligence, 20 pilots dead in 5 minutes, for nothing." Her voice was hard. "Every single morning I wake up and wonder if I could have done something different. Do you want to spend the rest of your lives wondering that?" Another long silence. Then the commander spoke. If we agree to the courts, how do we know that we'll not simply take the colony while we wait? We will station human ships here, Sora said immediately. As neutral observers, anyone who tries to take the colony fights us first. You do not have weapons, pointed out. No, Sora agreed, but we have shields and we have patience, and we have the respect of the coalition. Attack us and you will fight everyone. More silence held his breath. Very well, the commander said finally. We agree to the courts, but the humans must stay, as observers. Agreed, said. And Ambassador, thank you. We asked to see your battle scars. You showed us why you earned them. It is a lesson we will not forget. As the two fleets began to power down their weapons, put her hand on shoulder. We did it. We actually stopped a war. No, said quietly, watching the ships on the display. They stopped their war. We just showed them what would happen if they did not. Sometimes the best weapon is memory. Smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. Maybe we can teach the galaxy to stop wars before they start. That would be something. That would make all our wars mean something. Nodded, that would be the greatest victory of all. The success at the outer reach changed everything. Within days, requests flooded into the human delegation. A territorial dispute between two minor species in the sector. Trade disagreements that were turning violent near the galactic core. A civil war brewing on a planet in the Andromeda Relay. Everyone wanted human mediators. Everyone wanted to hear the stories and see the scars that might prevent their own conflicts from turning into disasters. Sat in his small office on the station, looking at the list of requests. Brought him another cup of coffee, something the aliens found fascinating. They could not understand why humans drank bitter hot water to stay awake. We cannot answer all of these, said, sitting down across from him. There are only a few hundred humans in the entire coalition space. We are stretched thin already. I know, rubbed his tired eyes. But how do we say no? Every conflict we ignore might become another war. The door opened without warning. Minu, the security officer, stepped in. He rarely visited the offices, preferring to patrol the corridors. There is someone here to see you. Several someones, actually. They say it is important. And followed Minu to one of the meeting rooms. Inside, they found an unusual gathering. Ambassador of the was there, along with the commander whose name turned out to be. Also present were delegates from 5 other species, including young delegate named Bora and the elderly quill historian. Thank you for meeting with us, said in his whispery voice. We have come with a proposal. Everyone sat down around the circular table. Spoke first. After what happened at the outer reach, Commander and I have been talking. We were enemies for 3 weeks, but in one afternoon, you humans made us realize we did not need to be. The coalition has peacekeepers, added. His rumbling voice made the table vibrate slightly. But they are soldiers. They stop fighting that has already started. What we need are people who prevent the fighting from starting at all. Bara the Young leaned forward eagerly. We need teachers, people who can show other species what you showed us, the cost of war, the value of peace, the way to choose carefully before choosing violence. We want to create an institute, explained. A place where delegates from all species can learn about conflict resolution, not just the theory but the reality, the human reality. Exchange glances with an institute that would take time, resources, teachers. We have time, said, and the coalition will provide resources. As for teachers, he gestured with one of his 4 arms. That is why we came to you. Humans must lead this. No other species has the experience. No other species has paid the price. What you call your battle scars are actually wisdom, added. Painful wisdom, hard-earned wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless. The galaxy needs this knowledge. Pulled out her tablet and started taking notes. What exactly would this institute teach? Bora answered enthusiastically. Everything. How to recognize when disagreements might become violence. how to negotiate when both sides are angry, how to rebuild trust after conflict, how to remember past mistakes without letting them poison the future. Also, the practical matters, said. During the standoff, your Captain Sora made decisions that saved lives, how she positioned her ship, how she spoke to both sides, how she stayed calm when everyone else was ready to fight. These are skills that can be taught. And the history, added quietly. You shared some of your wars with the Assembly, but there is more to learn, yes, more examples, more lessons. Thought about the files in his database, thousands of wars, hundreds of thousands of battles, millions of stories of both horror and hope. Yes, there is much more. Then share it, said simply. Teach us, teach the galaxy, so that we do not have to learn these lessons the way you did. A month later, stood in an empty building that would become the Human Conflict Resolution Institute. It was located on a neutral station near the Coalition headquarters. The building was large, with rooms for classes and spaces for simulations, and a library that would hold human history. Walked through the empty halls with him. It feels overwhelming, she admitted, teaching the entire galaxy about human wars. We are not teaching them about war, corrected gently. We are teaching them about peace. War is just the context. Workers from a dozen species moved through the building, setting up equipment and building furniture. A group were installing holographic projectors. Some were constructing a simulation chamber. They had volunteered to organize the library. Arrived with a small group of humans. He had agreed to be one of the instructors along with and others were coming too. Retired soldiers, diplomats, historians, people who had lived through conflicts and learned from them. I never thought my scars would be teaching tools, said, looking around the empty building. I always saw them as just reminders of pain. They are both, said, pain and teaching. That is the human way, I think. We turn our suffering into something useful. Over the next weeks, the Institute took shape. The library filled with records of human conflicts, carefully organized by and his team of historians. Each war was documented not just with facts and numbers, but with personal stories, letters from soldiers, diaries from civilians, photographs and videos and audio recordings. The simulation chamber was designed to let students experience difficult decisions without real consequences. What do you do when both sides seem right? How do you choose between bad options? When is compromise possible, and when is it not? Classrooms were set up with mixed seating, forcing different species to work together. A might sit next to a, learning to see each other as colleagues instead of potential enemies. Develop the curriculum. We start with human psychology, she explained, to why we fight. Fear, resources, pride, misunderstanding. Once they understand the causes, we teach recognition, how to see these patterns in their own conflicts. Then comes de-escalation, added. He had thrown himself into teaching with surprising passion. Communication techniques, body language, tone, how to make people feel heard even when you disagree with them. And finally, resolution, said. Finding solutions that let everyone save face, rebuilding after conflicts, creating systems that prevent the same problems from happening again. On the day before the Institute opened, gathered all the human instructors in the main hall. There were 23 of them now, from different backgrounds and different experiences. Tomorrow we start teaching aliens about human wars, he said. Some of you fought in those wars. All of you were affected by them. This will not be easy. Sharing our pain with strangers never is. Minyu spoke up from the back. But it is necessary. I show my scars every day now. At first it felt like being vulnerable, weak. But now I understand. These scars are proof that I survived, proof that I chose to keep living and keep helping others. If my pain can prevent someone else's pain, then it was worth it. Captain Sora nodded. I tell my students about losing my wing. Every time it hurts, but every time I see understanding in their eyes. They realize that war is not glorious. It is not an adventure, it is loss. And if understanding that keeps them from starting a war, then I will tell that story 1,000 times. We are not heroes, said quietly. We are survivors, and sometimes survival is the most important lesson we can teach. The next morning, the first class of students arrived, 50 delegates from 30 different species, young and old, warriors and scholars. Some came eagerly, others came skeptically. All of them came curious. Stood at the front of the first classroom. Welcome to the Human Conflict Resolution Institute. Over the next months, you will learn about humanity's long history of warfare. You will see things that will disturb you. You will hear stories that will make you uncomfortable. But you will also learn how we survived all of it, how we kept choosing to live, to forgive, to try again. He paused and looked at each student. We are not teaching you how to fight. We are teaching you how not to. That is harder. It takes more courage to choose peace than to choose war, but it is always, always worth it. A student raised a clawed hand. Why do humans care so much about helping us? Why spend so much time teaching us to avoid your mistakes? Smiled. Because we made those mistakes so you do not have to. Because every war prevented is a victory. Because peace is contagious, just like violence. And because he rolled up his sleeve, showing the faint scar from an old injury. Because carrying these scars gets easier when you know they might save someone else from earning their own. 6 months passed. The Human Conflict Resolution Institute had become the most talked-about institution in the galaxy. 300 students had graduated from the first programs. 12 conflicts had been peacefully resolved by graduates applying what they learned. Not a single one had escalated to violence. But today was special. Today, the Coalition was holding a ceremony to officially recognize the Institute as a permanent part of galactic society. Ships from every member species arrived at the station. The Great Hall was filled again, just like it had been when first spoke about human wars. Stood backstage with the other humans, adjusted his collar nervously. This is bigger than the first assembly. Representatives from 70 species are out there. I know, took a deep breath, but we are ready. Stood nearby with Minyu and was reviewing her notes one last time, checked the communication systems, and there was one more human present, a young man named. He had been chosen to lead the institute going forward. Was only 28, but he had an old soul. His grandfather had been a war correspondent who documented conflicts around Earth. His mother was a peace negotiator who helped end a civil war in Africa. He had grown up surrounded by stories of both destruction and healing. I am nervous, admitted. Speaking in front of the entire coalition, I am just one person. So was I 6 months ago, reminded him. But you are not speaking alone. You carry the voices of everyone who learned from our wars, everyone who chose peace because they knew the cost of war. The ceremony began. High Counselor Myra opened with a speech about the importance of learning from history. Ambassador spoke about how the Institute had changed his perspective. Commander talked about the peace treaty between and that had been signed just last week, dividing the disputed colony fairly. Then it was time for the humans to speak. Walked onto the stage, but this time he was not alone. All the human instructors walked with him. They stood in a line across the stage, facing the assembled delegates. 6 months ago, you asked to see humanity's battle scars, began. We showed you our wars, our losses, our failures. Today, we want to show you what came from those scars. One by one, the instructors stepped forward. Each one shared a brief story. Spoke about a student who had been ready to challenge a neighboring species to combat over an insult. I showed him the pictures from World War I. Soldiers stuck in mud, dying of disease and cold, fighting over a few hundred meters of destroyed land. He looked at me and said, "Is any insult worth that?" He went home and apologized instead. That is victory. Described a simulation where students had to decide whether to launch a first strike or wait for diplomacy. Most species in the galaxy have no experience with this choice, but we do. We have made it wrong many times. Now we teach them to make it right. Minyu talked about a delegate who had panic attacks when discussing conflict. She lost family in a small war on her planet. I showed her my scars and told her about the people I could not save. Then I told her about the ones I did save. She learned that survival is not weakness. It is strength. Now she teaches others on her world. Captain Sora shared news about a brewing conflict in the outer colonies that had been stopped before a single shot was fired. Two of our graduates were advisors to both sides. They recognized the pattern. They intervened. They used the techniques we taught them. Hundreds of lives saved because they learned from our mistakes. Explain the research the Institute was doing. We are documenting conflicts across the galaxy now, not just human ones. We are finding patterns, common causes, shared solutions. Every species has something to teach, but humans have learned the lessons most thoroughly because we paid the highest price. Spoke about the communication network the Institute had created. When a conflict starts anywhere in coalition space, our graduates are alerted. They share information. They offer help. They coordinate responses. We are building a galaxy-wide system of peace. Finally stepped forward. The young man looked nervous but determined. My name is, I have been chosen to lead this institute into the future. I am young. I have never fought in a war, but I have studied them all my life. I have learned from the people who survived them, and I have learned the most important lesson of all. He paused and looked around the hall. Scars are not just marks of damage, they are proof of healing. He gestured to the instructors behind him. Every human carries the scars of our species' violent history. We are born into a world still healing from wars fought generations ago. We grow up learning about horrors our ancestors committed and survived. It would be easy to be crushed by that weight, to be ashamed, to hide from it. But we do not hide, continued, his voice growing stronger. We show our scars, we share our stories, we say this is what we did, this is what it cost. Learn from us so you do not have to pay the same price. That is not weakness, that is courage. The hall was completely silent. Every delegate was listening. The Institute is not just a school, said. It is a promise that humanity's wars will mean something. That all the people who died, all the cities destroyed, all the families broken, all the pain and suffering will not be for nothing. Because if even one war is prevented because someone learned from our history, then our scars have purpose. He looked directly at the camera, knowing the broadcast was going to every coalition world. To every species watching this, I say, you do not have to learn the way we did. You do not have to stack bodies in trenches to understand that war is hell. You do not have to drop bombs on cities to know that violence destroys more than it creates. You do not have to earn your own scars. You can learn from ours. Stepped forward to join. The Galactic Coalition has existed for 10,000 years with minimal conflict. That is remarkable. That is beautiful. But it is also fragile. As the galaxy grows more crowded, as resources become scarcer, as different species with different needs interact more frequently, conflicts will arise. That is inevitable. What is not inevitable is war, added, joining them on stage. War is a choice that feels necessary in the moment but that you will regret for generations. We know. We have made that choice hundreds of times, and every single time we wished we had chosen differently. All the humans stood together now, a united front. High Counselor Myra floated forward from the audience. Her golden light pulsed warmly. When humanity first joined the coalition, I was uncertain, Myra admitted. A species with such a violent past, could they truly fit in our peaceful galaxy? But I was asking the wrong question. The right question is, can we afford not to have them? She turned to address the full assembly. Humanity's gift to us is not their capacity for violence. It is their refusal to forget the cost of that violence. They turn their worst moments into lessons, their pain into wisdom, their scars into shields that protect others. Myra raised her hands, and a massive holographic display appeared behind the humans. It showed a statue, the design for a monument that would be built at the entrance to the Institute. The statue depicted a human figure standing strong, lifting their shirt. But where scars should be, there were stars. Countless stars, each one representing a war. And between the stars were threads of light connecting them, showing how each conflict led to understanding, to change, to growth. This monument will remind everyone who enters the Institute what they are here to learn, Myra explained. Not just about war, but about survival. Not just about fighting, but about healing. Not just about humanity's past, but about the galaxy's future. The inscription on the monument base appeared, written in every coalition language. They asked to see humanity's battle scars. We showed them our wounds. Then we taught them how to heal. These stars are our wars. These threads are our lessons. Learn from our pain so you never have to earn your own. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, not for celebration but for reflection. Every delegate sat quietly, thinking about their own species, their own potential for conflict, their own choices ahead. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, a young approached. She shimmered with soft blue light, marking her as barely an adult by her species' standards. "I want to enroll in the Institute," she said shyly. "My species has never had war. We do not understand conflict at all. Is that okay? Can someone with no experience still learn?" Smiled warmly. "That is exactly who should learn. You are not here to study war. You are here to learn how to prevent it. Your lack of experience is not a weakness. It is a gift. You can learn these lessons without the trauma." "Did humans really fight each other as much as the records show?" she asked. "Yes," said honestly. "More actually. We only document the major wars. There were thousands of smaller conflicts, skirmishes, battles, feuds. We were very good at hurting each other." "But you stopped." "We are trying to stop," corrected. "There is still conflict on Earth, still disagreements, still violence, but it is less than before, much less. And every generation tries to be better than the last. That is all we can do. Try, learn, improve, remember." The young touched one of the holographic stars in the monument display. "Which war does this one represent?" "The Korean War," said. 3 million dead. A peninsula divided. Families separated for generations. My great-great-grandfather fought in that war. He never talked about it, but my great-grandfather inherited his silence. That silence hurt our family for decades. Only when we finally started talking about the war, about the pain, did healing begin. "So the scars are not just on bodies," the said thoughtfully. "They are in minds and families and entire societies." "Yes, and that is why we teach, because invisible scars need healing too." As night fell on the station, stood at a window looking out at the stars, found him there. "Thinking about home?" she asked. "Thinking about tomorrow," replied. "About all the species who will go to the Institute, about all the wars that might not happen because of what we teach them." "Do you think it will work? Can we really change the galaxy?" Thought for a moment. "We cannot stop all wars. Conflict is part of life, but we can make war harder to choose. We can make peace easier to find. We can give people the tools to solve problems before they become battles. That is enough." "Our scars do have meaning then." "They always had meaning," said quietly. "We just had to choose what that meaning would be. For a long time, humans used our scars as excuses, reasons to fear each other, reasons to hate, reasons to fight more. But now we use them as warnings, as lessons, as gifts to others so they do not suffer the same wounds." Far below in the Institute, night classes were beginning. Anna sat side by side learning together. I asked careful questions about mediation. A Quill studied human psychology, and in every classroom instructors shared stories. Hard stories, painful stories, true stories. Stories of war, stories of loss, stories of mistakes and regrets. But also stories of survival, of forgiveness, of people who chose to live instead of choosing to hate. Humanity had asked the galaxy to see their battle scars, and in showing those scars, they had given the galaxy something more valuable than any weapon or technology. They had given them the wisdom to avoid earning scars of their own. And that thought as he watched the stars was the greatest victory humanity had ever achieved. Not conquering the galaxy, not winning wars, but teaching the galaxy how to live without them.